Hey guys, today I'm going to be reading by The Great Horn Spoon by Fleischman. Chapter 5, The Land of Fire. The days grew shorter. The Lady Wilma beat her way toward the tip of South America, and summer faded quickly from the sea. Jack, who had been going barefoot for weeks to keep cool, now put on his shoes to keep warm. The gold seekers put away their straw hats and dug in their sea chests for woolen underwear. Off the coast of Patagonia, Jack awoke to find 6 inches of snow on deck and a school of sperm whales off the starboard bow. Soon the passengers were bundled up in great cocoons of clothing. The thin men looked like fat ones, and fat men looked enormous. For days, Praiseworthy and Jack watched the crew tighten the riggings and check the canvas against the coming winds and crashing seas of Cape Horn. An air of impending adventure ran through the ship. Jack listened to tales of whaling ships disappearing forever from the roaring cape, of square riggers with their masts uprooted like trees, of being driven back by horrendous headwinds, of the barks wandering in endless fog. Nonsense, Praiseworthy would say, mere seance, but even more forbidding, it seemed to Jack, were stories told of sea captains tempted by a shorter route to the Pacific. Though the narrow and vile-tempered Strait of Magellan, their ships were sometimes cracked into two like nuts between the rocky jaws of the passage. More than one brave captain had turned back for the tender mercies of Cape Horn itself. Stuff and nonsense, Praiseworthy would say, even though he believed every word of it. We may be hit a bit of inclement weather, gentlemen, but our good captain will give the back of his hand to the Cape. He told me so himself. Why the wild bull of the seas could navigate these waters with his eyes shut. Well, said Mr. Azarian Jones, I hope he doesn't try that. It'll suit me fine if he keeps both eyes open, and then some. The mountainous Yankee trader wore a muffler tied around his face, as if he had a toothache, to keep his ears warm. In the pilot house, Captain Swain studied his charts. The Sea Raven was obviously far in the lead, but San Francisco was yet a long way off. Captain Swain knew well enough of the storms lying in wait of the Horn, winds that could drive a ship back 20 miles for every one it gained. Nevertheless, the nearer the Lady Wilma crept into the furious tip of the continent, the more eager Captain Swain became. There were waters to test the master's skill. Praiseworthy, who was not born to adventure, was surprised to find it decidedly to his liking. His face was weltering on good days, and bad he took his brisk laps around deck and enjoyed the sting of the sea on his cheeks. I must admit, he said to Jack, that I'm rather keen of having a look at the notorious Cape. You might watch for the fires. Fires, said Jack, attempting to keep up with Praiseworthy's long stride. At Tierra del Fuego, the captain tells me the natives keep great fires going day and night, keep themselves and their sheep from freezing. Tierra del Fuego, the land of fire. That's what the name means. A burst of spray rose from the bows and felt like rain. Land of fire, said Jack. I'll watch for it. Almost without warning, the first storm came roaring off the Arctic wastes and bore down on the paddle wheeler. The sun went out like a match. Long shrieking winds, loaded with hailstones, struck the ship like a buckshot. The oak wheel spun out of the hands of the quartermaster. The Lady Wilma went teetering over the side, digging her ribs deep into the seas. Jack, who had just sat down to a bowl of chowder, saw the bowl fly off in one direction, the chowder in another, and the spoon in a third. "I do believe we've arrived off the Horn," said Praiseworthy, hanging onto his bowler hat. Captain Swain lent a hand to the wheel, righting the ship and turning her bowsprit into the wind. In the main saloon, the gold seekers had been thrown together in a tangle of arms and legs. No sooner did they unreveal themselves, with another violent lurch of the ship knotted them together again. The ship's bell rang in the wind. Howling blasts ripped off the tops of the waves, riding like swells. The Lady Wilma seemed to climb halfway into the sky, only to drop with a crash into the troughs. Jack got a wild glimpse of the sea through the porthole, and if he was afraid, he was too busy hanging on to give it much thought. The side-wheeler burrowed into the storm. Sea water came rushing along the decks and slipped down the hatches like so many waterfalls. Sailors in their stocking caps were busy everywhere, battening the hatches and taking in every rag of canvas. "A mere squall," said Praiseworthy, holding on to a post with the hook of his black umbrella. "Why, in these latitudes it is considered a fine spring day, I believe." The weather lasted more than a week. For a day or two, seabirds came out of the sky and rode the yardarms. The gold seekers emerged from their cabins bruised and sleepless and hungry. Some said it was harder to eat than sleep, and others said it was harder to sleep than eat. But hardly had the seas calmed when another gale burst from the sky. Captain Swain no longer left the pilot house. The nights were now 16 hours long, and the days were a mere glimmer of light. The Lady Wilma continued westing, fighting for every foot of water. Her paddle wheels thrashed hour after hour and day after day. Being experienced hands, Praiseworthy and Jack helped keep the fire roaring in the furnace. Despite the crash and thunder of the seas, the butler seemed unafraid, and Jack found comfort in being at his side. Whale oil lamps flickered in the passageways day and night. It was hard to tell one from the other. The nights were the worst. Jack's hammock swayed and the cabin walls swung. If Mr. Azarian Jones wasn't pitched out of his bunk, it was Dr. Duckby. More than once, the Mountain Jim awoke to find them both sprawled across him. I've known grizzly bears that were a mite friendlier than this Billy B. hanged Cape Horn. Headwings battled the paddle wheeler to a complete standstill, and Jack began to wonder if they would ever reach the Pacific. The Lady Wilma was thrashing with all her steam to stay in one place, but then a calm would set in like a great practical joke. The moment the passengers began to snore in their cabins, fresh winds would swoop down and jerk the ship awake. There'll be nothing to do but sleep when we reach the Pacific. Praiseworthy pointed out the portholes were almost frozen. Over and over once did Jack get a glimpse of land to starboard. Dark cliffs seemed to hang like drapers from the misty sky. And then the weather closed in again and they were gone. "Do you think there's any chance we might catch up with the Sea Raven?" Jack asked, hanging on to his hammock. "We could pass within 100 yards of each other with knowing it," Praiseworthy said. "We can't get to San Francisco soon enough to suit me. I'll put in Mr. Azarian Jones. I hope we win, said Jack. I don't think Captain Swain has the slightest intention of losing, said Praiseworthy. For 37 days, the side-wheeler battered and rammed her way through crashing headwinds that attempted to drive her back. And then on a Tuesday morning, the sun broke out, clear and sharp, and hung like an ornament in the northern sky. One by one, the deck hatches opened, and the gold seekers came on deck, as if from some dark dungeon. Their eyes blinked in an unfamiliar brightness of the day. We've made it, yelled Mountain Jim, throwing down his yellow fur cap. Boys, this here's the Pacific Ocean. A yell went up around the ships, and Captain Swain leaned out of the pilot house. His beard had grown an inch. He gave a hearty wave and then came out of the paddle box with his long glass. After a moment of sweeping by the seas, he stopped. By grabs, he roared. There she is, the Sea Raven. She's astern of us. Another yell went up, and the gold seekers rushed to the afterdeck for a look. There was the Sea Raven indeed, traveling far behind. It seemed to Jack the most exciting moment of his life. A remarkable performance, said Praiseworthy, but he was baffled. It seemed hardly possible that the Lady Wilma had charged ahead against the furies of the past 37 days, and yet there stood the Sea Raven behind them as proof. I watched for the fires, said Jack, but I never did catch a sight of them, Praiseworthy. Suddenly the butler's eyes lit up. Why, Master Jack, you solved it. Solved what? You didn't see the fires of the Tierra del Fuego because they weren't to be seen. But you said, I meant to say the fires were there, but we weren't. At that moment, Captain Swain had joined the gold seekers on the afterdeck. Jack had never seen him with such a wide and merry grin glowing from the depths of his whiskers. I hope you gentlemen enjoyed your passage around the Horn. The Wild Bull of Seas, said the Wild Bull of Seas. Captain, Praiseworthy said with a gleam in his eye, Master Jack appears to be on your secret. What's that? We have been around the Horn, sir. Captain Swain gave Jack a twinkling glance. Is that so, lad? All I said was, Jack, said Jack. What he means is that you have pulled off a most startling piece of seamanship, sir, interrupted the butler. The reason Master Jack didn't catch a sight of the great fire at Land's End, why, the reason, sir, is that you took the Lady Wilma through the deadly Strait of Magellan. The Strait of Magellan, you say? The captain rubbed his plum nose. That's the rectangular ship's graveyard. And then he gave Jack a heavy squint. Of course it cuts hundreds of miles off the voyage around the Horn. Hundreds of miles. A ship's master can be sorely tempted. You mean to say, sir, said Mr. Azarian Jones, turning white, that we've been bouncing around in that awful place? I confess, chuckled the captain. The lad here has found me out. Then he pointed to the Sea Raven. Look at her, following us, gentlemen, like a chick after a hen. That is it for today. I hope you enjoyed this read-along. And if you have a request for a read-along, just let me know in the discussion board on my channel. Bye, and stay tuned for Chapter 6.